What would you say if a cop handed back your license, smiled, and said, "Do you mind waiting here for a minute?" If you say yes without thinking, your traffic stop can turn into a whole new investigation. And that tiny moment is where a lot of good people hand away rights they never even knew they had. Before I give you the exact words, hit subscribe right now so you can find this video again when you actually need it on a real roadside stop, and tap like because what you're about to hear could keep your warning from turning into handcuffs. Here's the reality. When an officer says, "Do you mind waiting here?" that can sound polite, casual, even friendly, but your answer matters more than your speed, your tone, or your excuse. Most people have no idea that the stop may already be over when that question gets asked. That means you're sure can give the officer extra time to dig, ask more questions, call for a dog, or ask for consent to search. I've analyzed over 200 Bodycam videos, and you see the same pattern again and again. A normal stop ends. Then the casual question comes. Then the driver keeps talking. Then everything changes. In this video, you're going to learn the exact sentence that forces the moment into the open, the follow-up line that protects your car, the silence move that stops you from talking yourself into trouble, and the compliance phrase that keeps you safe without giving anything away. Let me show you exactly how smart drivers handle this. Now let's talk about why this catches you off guard. You're nervous. You want the officer gone. You think being extra nice will make everything easier. So when you hear, "Do you mind waiting here?" you treat it like small talk. You think it would look rude to say no. That's the trap. A traffic stop has a mission. Check your license. Check registration. Handle the ticket or warning. Then you leave. But officers are trained to look for reasons to keep talking when they think something else might be going on. Maybe they want to ask about drugs. Maybe they want to separate you from your car. Maybe they want to see if you'll agree to something they could not force. Ohio v. Robinette matters here because the Supreme Court said police do not have to tell you that you're free to go before asking more questions or asking for consent. So if you wait for the officer to clearly release you, you may wait too long. When that question comes, your first move is simple. You ask where you stand. You look at the officer and say this, "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Those exact words. Memorize that line. Say it calmly, say it clearly, then stop talking. This works because it forces the officer to pick one lane. If you're being detained, the officer has to own that. If you're free to leave, the officer has to deal with that too. Florida v. Bostick gave the basic test in plain English. The question is whether a reasonable person would feel free to decline the request or end the encounter. Your question makes that issue clear. Ohio versus Robinette matters too, because police do not have to volunteer. You're free to go. So you ask. You make the moment plain. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it shows you were not volunteering for extra contact. It shows you were trying to leave, not trying to cooperate with an open-ended fishing trip. This is 100% legal. You are not fighting. You are not resisting. You are not being rude. You are asking a fair legal question in a calm voice. Watch what happens when you use it. Either the officer says you're free to go, which is what you want, or the officer says you're detained, which tells you the stop just got more serious and you need to shut up fast. If you skip this line, you stay in that fuzzy middle area where you feel stuck. The officer acts casual and the extra questions keep rolling. Bad way. Most drivers say, "Sure, no problem." Then the officer keeps them there, asks more questions, and turns a warning into an investigation. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Then the officer has to either justify the delay or let them go. If the officer says, "Just hang tight," ask the same question again one time, calmly. If the officer says you're free to leave, leave. Don't stand there talking. Don't ask if you did anything wrong. Don't try to be charming. Just go. Have you ever had an officer turn a stop into casual small talk right at the end? Tell me in the comments, because that fake relaxed moment catches a lot of drivers. Your second move protects your car and your stuff. If the officer starts asking to look around or asks you to keep waiting while they check one more thing, you say this, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Word for word, keep it short. Don't explain. Don't add jokes. Don't say, I guess that's okay if you need to." Just say the line and stop. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. Consent is the shortcut. If you give consent, you can destroy a lot of the fight your lawyer would have later. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection because it removes the easy path. Rodriguez v. United States is huge here. The Supreme Court said police cannot stretch a traffic stop longer than needed for the traffic mission just to do things like a dog sniff unless they have a real legal reason called reasonable suspicion. In plain English, they can't add time just because they feel curious. But here's the reality. If you say yes to waiting, yes to questions, or yes to a search, you help them. Help. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. Your refusal does not magically stop police from doing whatever they already have legal grounds to do, but it stops you from volunteering your rights away. That matters. A lot. Say the line once. Calm voice, hands visible, no attitude. If the officer searches anyway, do not argue on the roadside. Do not grab anything, do not block the search. Your job is not to win on the shoulder of the road. Your job is to make your position clear for later. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it changes the officer's report too. Instead of writing, "driver agreed," they now have to explain why they searched without your consent. That difference can save your case. Bad way, most drivers say, I don't have anything, so go ahead. Then the officer searches everything, and your own words help justify it later. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Then the officer loses the easy shortcut and has to rely on actual legal grounds. This is 100% legal. You do not have to make their job easier. You do not get bonus points for volunteering your trunk, your bags, or your time. Your third move is the one that saves you from yourself. After you ask if you're free to leave, and after you refuse consent, the officer may keep talking. Where are you headed? Why are you nervous? You got anything illegal in the car? Mind if I ask you a few questions? This is where people sink themselves. You think you can talk your way out. You think a long answer sounds honest. You think silence looks guilty. That is exactly backwards. Here's exactly what you say. I choose to remain silent. I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer. If you want an even shorter version, say, I'm not answering questions. Then stop. Berghuis v. Tompkins matters because the Supreme Court said you need to clearly say you are using your right to remain silent. Just sitting there quietly is not always enough. If you start talking again, your words can be used. Berkemer v. McCarty matters too because the court said normal roadside questioning during a regular stop is usually not the same as full custody. That means you should not wait around for a movie-style Miranda warning before protecting yourself. You protect yourself early. You protect yourself with your own mouth. Let me show you exactly why this matters. Officers are trained to ask small questions that feel harmless. How long you been driving? Whose car is this? Why do you seem tense when I walked up? You answer 3 or 4 of those, and suddenly they say your story changed. Suddenly they say you looked evasive. Suddenly they say you admitted something you did not even mean. Bad way. Most drivers say, I'm just coming from my cousin's place, and yeah, I was nervous because I saw you behind me, but I don't do drugs or anything. Then every extra word becomes evidence, even if you meant nothing by it. Good way. Smart drivers say, I choose to remain silent. I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer. Then the fishing trip gets much harder. You still give the basics the law requires, like your license and registration when needed. You still comply with lawful commands. But you do not help build a case against yourself. This is not about sounding tough. It's about sounding clear. Short beats clever every time. 90% of drivers don't know what's coming next. Stay with me because this next move is where calm people beat pressure. Your fourth move is how you stay safe without giving ground. Sometimes the officer says, step out of the car. Sometimes the officer says, wait on the curb. Sometimes the officer says, stand over here while I sort this out. You need to know the difference between physical compliance and legal consent. You can obey a lawful order without agreeing to extra questioning or extra searching. Listen closely because this is critical. Here's what you say. I will comply with your lawful orders, but I do not consent to any searches or additional questioning. That sentence is gold because it does 2 things at once. It keeps you safe in the moment, and it protects your rights for later. Pennsylvania versus Mimms says police can order a driver out of the car during a lawful traffic stop. Arizona versus Johnson says officers can control the scene for safety and may ask unrelated questions as long as they do not measurably extend the stop. In plain English, that means you should not argue over where you stand or whether you step out. You comply, but you do not turn compliance into permission. You do not say, sure, do whatever you need. You do not start explaining your whole life story on the sidewalk. You keep your body cooperative and your words tight. Bad way. Most drivers say, okay, I'm getting out, and you can check whatever you want because I've got nothing to hide. Then the officer gets both compliance and consent in the same breath. Good way. Smart drivers say, I will comply with your lawful orders, but I do not consent to any searches or additional questioning. Then they stay calm, keep their hands visible, and stop feeding the stop. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings, and it matters because judges look at what you said, not just what the officer did. If you act respectful and still protect your rights, you look measured, not hostile. That can matter later more than you think. Now let's tie the law together in plain English so you really own this. Rodriguez v. United States says your stop cannot be stretched out longer than needed for the traffic reason unless police have a real legal basis. That means once the traffic job is done, extra delay is a big deal. Florida v. Bostick says the real question is whether a normal person would feel free to say no or end the encounter. That is why your line, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" is so powerful. It forces that issue into the open. Ohio v. Robinette says police do not have to tell you that you are free to go before asking for more consent. That is why waiting for the officer to volunteer that information is a mistake. And Pennsylvania v. Mimms reminds you that officers can give some lawful commands during a stop, like telling you to step out. So your goal is not to argue every command. Your goal is to separate lawful compliance from voluntary consent. You comply physically. You refuse consent verbally. You stop answering questions. That is how all these rules fit together for you on a real roadside stop. Now picture your stop. You're driving home at night. You get pulled over for a busted taillight. The officer checks your stuff, comes back, and says you're getting a warning. So far, fine. Then comes the turn. The officer smiles and says, "Do you mind waiting here a minute? I just want to ask you a few things." The wrong way goes like this. You say, "Sure." Then you stay standing there. The officer asks where you came from. You give a long answer. The officer asks if you have anything illegal. You laugh and say no. The officer asks to take a look in the car. You say, "I don't care. I've got nothing." Now your stop is alive again. You gave time, words, and consent. Watch what happens. The officer now has more facts to write down, more details to twist, and more room to search. Now the right way. Same stop, same taillight, same smile, same question. But this time, you're ready. You say, "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave?" If the officer says you're free to go, you leave. If the officer keeps pressing, you say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." If more questions come, you say, "I choose to remain silent. I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer." If you're told to step out or stand somewhere, you say, "I will comply with your lawful orders, but I do not consent to any searches or additional questioning." That is it. No speech, no debate, no roadside law school, just short, clean lines. The wrong way gives the officer space. The right way gives the officer choices. Either develop real legal grounds or let you go. And if things still go bad, your words helped your defense instead of hurting it. Next week, I'm breaking down what to say when cops claim they smell weed from your car. Subscribe right now because that trick gets people searched every single day, and you do not want to miss that one. So burn these lines into your memory. First, when the stop seems over and the officer wants more time, you ask, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Second, if the officer wants inside your car or your bags, you say, "I do not consent to any searches." Third, if the questions keep coming, you say, "I choose to remain silent. I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer." Fourth, if you get lawful commands, you comply physically but protect yourself verbally. You do not need to be rude. You do not need to be scared. You need to be clear. That clarity can change your whole outcome. Hit subscribe so you catch that weed smell video next week. Smash that like button if this just gave you words you can actually use under pressure. And drop a comment telling me which line you're memorizing first. Stay calm, stay smart, and stay safe out there.